Thank you, Lloyd. My name is Paige Medill, and today I'm really thrilled to be speaking with Andrew about the Constitutional Convention. Before we actually discuss the convention, would you be able to tell me a little bit about your background and what motivated you to represent your community?
Sure. Hi everyone, and thanks for having me. My name is Andrew Thornhill. I am an American that lives and works in the country of Georgia, and that is important because the Cardano Foundation actually has active projects inside Georgia, and I've been managing. I helped create those and manage those really since about 2018, and so I work fully in blockchain space. I've moved almost all my businesses over to blockchain in like 2015 or so. And through that process, I created some relationships that ended up, let's say, fomenting into people that work inside the Cardano Foundation. And so I became ambassador of Cardano to the country of Georgia, where I run community events and active events. And I'm quite active in the space, in the blockchain space. Yeah, and so we have some kind of high visibility projects. We had an MOU with the Ministry of Economy, who the minister also is the vice prime minister of the country. Before that, he was the minister of agriculture, and there we put together the first track and trace program for wine. And that's a project that's still ongoing. So we started with 5,000 bottles and then 100,000, and now we're getting ready to engage 1 million bottles of Georgian wine that is trackable through Cardano, the blockchain Cardano. And so this is the first ever public track and trace, public blockchain track and trace project, and that's led to a lot of opportunities to speak, on the importance of public blockchain and whatnot. So I'm quite active, let's say, in Cardano, and then because I lead the events, I was actually asked by someone inside Cardano. I don't believe it was CF, but someone pinged me and said, "Hey, would you be comfortable running, a constitutional event, in the summer?" And I looked it up, and I was like, "Yeah, actually, this sounds amazing." And so I hosted the event. I was not actively campaigning, but I was elected as the first delegate to represent the country of Georgia. And as it turns out, we were the only country within like a couple thousand miles, and so I had people coming, representation voices from Turkey and Armenia, and whatnot. So yeah, I was quite happy and quite proud to represent the region.
That's amazing. Well, thank you so much for your time today. It's really great to meet you. I'm sure this might be difficult, but if you're able to pick one, what would be your most memorable moment from the Constitutional Convention? And how did it shape your understanding of collaborative governance?
Yeah, I actually it was really funny because I'm not super active on Instagram, but I did go live later that evening after the constitutional signing, and it's the only time I've gone live or like published like a live story, let's say. And inside that story were pictures of me right before I signed the Constitution. And the event was, the entire week was, it wasn't scripted, but it was organized, and it was we were very busy, from early in the morning until late at night, which included time for caucusing and whatnot. But I mean, there was no free time. Like you couldn't just like go walk around Buenos Aires for a couple hours. I mean, we were very very busy, and all of it was leading up really to that moment when we, not just when we passed the Constitution, which was also incredible, but when we signed it. And suddenly we were like, all the delegates, all of us were kind of lined up backstage, and then everyone was excited, we were kind of giddy, and but it was kind of funny because we're like in a university hallway, all dressed up, and it was a little bit unclear what was going to happen, and we had run late on some other things, and so we didn't have a chance to like trial run it. And so we were all, it was kind of like this really funny moment where we're all like entering into the stage from the hallway, and the back of the stage is like, it's like a back of any business. It's messy and cluttery, and there was, dozens of people running around, and there's wires and cables everywhere, and there's like, 30 computers, and it looked like a horror movie, some 70s horror movie. It was quite funny. And but then all of a sudden, like, all of a sudden, like, there's Hoskinson, and he hands you a pen that's, that has your name on it, and you got about 30 seconds to a minute to really just kind of like think about what's going on, and he asks you a couple questions, and you're like, holy crap, I'm doing this right now. Like, this is actually happening. And then, the timer goes to zero, the red light flashes, then boom, you're on stage. Like, there's no real time to like kind of digest it and think about it. And so you're walking on stage and you're like, I gotta hope I don't trip. I hope I don't fall. I hope I don't make a fool of myself. It was really an incredible moment, and then, they gave us some instruction. They're like, look for your name, and people were telling stories about delegates were saying, "Oh, I couldn't find my name. I signed somewhere else." It was just really quite funny. But yeah, it was a really powerful moment. And then, the lights are shining on you, the Klieg lights are there and everything, and like, that there's an audience out there, and you're just trying to like not screw up, and everyone's cheering. You're just like, "Yeah, we signed you." It was. I stayed in South America for the month, but um, yeah, it was an incredible, just absolutely, it was an amazing moment, and it was quite memorable, and it was, an apex moment, let's say, over the cascade of events that took place in that week. So
Absolutely. I love that. That does sound like it would be very memorable and nerve-wracking also.
apparently there's, and I guess there's video and like footage of it out there, and I need to go and find it and put it on my social media and whatnot. I took the rest of the, so I've never been to South America before, and so I stayed in Argentina, and then I bounced over to Uruguay, and then Brazil, and then I met my parents for Christmas in Mexico. And in Mexico I caught some like cold or something, but I really have been off social media. I haven't done anything. I mean, I was also elected to the Constitutional Committee, and so I've been very active with that. And we have a big meetings happening even tomorrow. But other than that, I haven't done really anything on social media or anything. So I need to go back and find this. I'm sure there's a pretty funny picture of me like signing or whatever.
I'm so sure. Well, it sounds like you had a really good time. So I'm happy
It
to
was
hear that.
incredible. Met people from all
Amazing.
over the world, and yeah, and we're still friends. And we have a couple of because of my leadership position, and the proximity of Georgia to Europe, I'm in the European chat, and they're very active, and it's just fun like keeping up with them. And yeah, so it's been really, really nice.
Amazing. During the convention, delegates achieved really good consensus on a number of different issues. Could you share a specific moment where you saw these diverse perspectives come together effectively?
Yeah, it was really an interesting moment. Unfortunately, the a lot of the Southeast Asian and African delegates were kind of forced to held their own event, and so we were split, not in terms of like of consensus, but we were split in terms of location, and that also then created a little bit of a unfortunate like set of boundaries, or like some, there was some like nativism, let's say, that kind of like, unfortunately crept in, where you know they thought something, we thought something, and then and it was, and really the all of the Cardano community tried to create like these, there's no barriers, and there's a room you could go and like talk to them and whatnot, but anyway, it still happened, right? And so we have a delegate, an amazing guy, really, really awesome guy from Canada, who made an unfortunate comment, I think, and I think you probably see the same thing, about something around like, what is going to be the purpose of like funding events and whatnot, and kind of going forward, and he was like, oh, it's like, this is like we're slipping into communism, and he didn't mean it, and I've talked to him since then, but it was kind of like this like spark thing, which then all of a sudden set off, the other group, and they kind of, and all of a sudden everyone coalesced, right? And so like there was like this idea that, oh, are we woke, or are we, trying to figure stuff out, are we trying to make this work, are we slipping into like, some socialism or forced socialism, and none of those things were happening, right? We were all just trying to figure this out and trying to like make things happen. And I think that once Will made that statement, even he coalesced, right? So once that happened, and then there was like kind of like, oh gosh, I didn't mean it, and everyone was just kind of like, oh, let's be careful what we're saying. And I think people on both places, and everyone, even on our side, we're all just like, let's just make this work. Let's forget about you know certain, like, modern words that maybe carry double meaning, and let's focus on trying to figure this out, and make this work, or make it not work. But if it's not going to work, let's not do it over some like political words. Let's do it because there's some factual, fundamental technology issue or something. And so that happened near it happened, I think, a day or 2 days before we actually voted on the Constitution. And that moment, you could really feel that, um, everyone was just kind of like, we're all together. Even Will, the guy who said it, we were all just like, you know what, we're gonna figure this out. And that was kind of, I think, a breakthrough moment. um, and I've talked to a lot of the delegates, since then, and I've talked to Will since then, and William, and yeah, I mean, I think that was just one of those moments where it was like, oh wow, okay, now let's, you know, before we say something that we don't mean, let's say the things that we do mean, and let's figure this out. And so it was a really nice moment. So
Absolutely. That's a really interesting perspective as well. This is something that has come up quite frequently, especially online, which you may have missed seeing as you were away. But temperature checks. That is something that is
yeah, that was, yeah, funny.
How did these sort of consensus building methods influence the quality of discussion and the decision making that happened? Did that change things?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, again, that's, I guess, a Lloydism, that kind of came up. I mean, and indeed, the basis of it was innocent, right? And so there was no, I don't think there was any intent to like try to like push any agenda or whatever. And like, remember, 30 minutes before we voted, yes, Hoskinson was like, don't vote yes if there's any issue that you don't agree with. He said this on stage. So I don't think that anyone was trying to push something, but because there was so little structure around, how do we say this? So we were not following strict rules of parliamentary procedure, right? So we had the kind of abridged parliamentary procedure, and because of the abridgedness and the lack of true coherent rules, and like how this is all kind of coming together, the temperature check became something bigger, I think, than what it was intended to be. And then the issue became, well, can we get a temperature check on this? So the delegates were asking, hey, can we get a temperature check? Um, because that we knew that if there was a temperature check was kind of like a ad hoc vote, yes, no, and if it's like, and we didn't have time to leave our seat and caucus, right? And so we didn't always know what everyone was thinking. We had a couple of hotheads that were saying things, and a couple of cool heads that seemed rational, but it was never clear what like the consensus was. And so the temperature check became more powerful than just a, hey, let's get a read of where we are in the room. It became like a mechanism by which we could advance certain policy, and certain discussions inside those policies. And so I'm not going to say it's hijacked by the delegates, but it was, in the lack of like overall structure, it became an important component of what we're doing. And then you know it was not silly, but we would make kind of fun of it. We were like, hey, can we get a temperature check on this? And then of course, when we were in more casual formats, like at the event, at the parties and whatnot, we're like, hey, let's get a temperature check on the food, or whatever. It was kind of funny. But yeah, I definitely remember the temperature checks. Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, that's a really interesting way of looking at it as well. Looking back at the process, what would you say surprised you most about working with delegates from different cultural and geographic backgrounds?
Well, what's really interesting is actually, something that came up after. kind of after the meetings, but like still during this process, we're waiting for, on-chain voting, was that one of the African delegates made a comment about the Voltaire, and so as you probably know, like each significant epoch or movement, and before the hard fork becomes like this moment in time that's defined by like famous thinkers, and so there was the Voltaire era of Cardano, and one of the African delegates said, "Hey, listen, we actually have a little bit of a problem with that because Voltaire is this person that had like this history, and like, hey." And what's interesting is that almost all of the European and American delegates never thought about it, not once. Like it didn't even cross our mind. We were just like, "Oh, Voltaire." I can't even tell you without looking up some stuff like exactly what Voltaire did. I just know that he is a super important, person in history and a scientist and whatnot. But there was a whole nother story, and the question was, hey, do we feel comfortable naming these periods, after a potentially controversial, historical figure, and the answer was that no, we don't. Of course not. We don't want that. We have no interest in that, and not to take away any of the good things that Voltaire did, but by no means are we trying to tie Cardano's legacy to something that has nothing to do with blockchain,
Absolutely.
and we, especially when all of our achievements can easily stand on their own, as incredible periods of history. And so it was really good to hear that. It was really good for us, especially for myself. And we voted, I think, almost immediately. We were like, oh my god, yes, we don't want any of that. And it was another perspective, and it was something that apparently had taken up quite a bit of um, of of talk time in the other meeting. And they kind of like cautiously brought it up to us, being like, hey, well, what do you guys kind of think about this? And all of us were like, oh my god, we absolutely need to consider this. And so yeah, it was just really nice to have a completely, I wouldn't say divergent thought, but it was a totally different thought structure, totally different, attack. Very something that we hadn't not even come up once, in the more European, American side, and it was really refreshing to hear. It was really good.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I really like that. Could you describe a challenge you encountered during the convention, and if you did, and how you worked with other delegates to overcome it?
Well, I mean, one of the early challenges I think was, hey, are we going to do this or not? And the question was, what would it take for you to vote no? And this was kind of like I think a question I think a lot of the delegates asked themselves, but also asked each other. And as you know, we had a couple of no votes, even at the end. But the the difficulty was during the during the days that were before the vote, we had some issues that popped up that were some of which were kind of contentious, and some were things I never thought about. And so so we have to kind of quickly assess as a group and also as individuals. Okay, is this important enough to like derail, and should we derail? And number two, like, or number three, like, what would it, what, how are we going to get past this? Like, and if it's something that's critical, what are we going to do to get past it? And what happened, was that a couple of those points, people, delegates, at least my reading of it, was that there were enough delegates that were like, yeah, this is a thing. This is a real thing. And without some definition or without some clarity or without some like, more talk about this, I'm going to vote no. And so then the difficulty became, okay, well, how are we going to like, how are we going to talk about, how are we going to attack this issue? How are we going to go about it, in a way that like respects, the procedure that was put in place versus the time that we have versus the difference of thoughts versus the two different, locations, for the meeting. And so, yeah, there was some moments where just like, oh crap. One of the reasons why we didn't have time to do a run through of the constitutional signing was because we kind of chose to speak more. Like we wanted to talk more. We wanted to like have like more thought and more conversation, and that's a good thing, right? It's a very good thing because in the end, we had a near 100% vote, yes, because people, um, myself included, had talked through and worked through the issues to the point where we're like, you know what, I'm comfortable with this happening, and I'm comfortable with how we're going forward, and I'm electing to vote yes, on this, groundbreaking, digital age blockchain constitution. So yeah, it was interesting. It led to some very dinners, let's say, some very interesting meals.
Absolutely, for sure. Interesting dinners. What aspect of the final constitution, if you can pick one, makes you the most proud, and why do you believe it'll benefit the broader community?
Oh, that's a good question. What am I most proud of? Well, I'm going to say that I am most proud that we do not have definitions inside the Constitution. That it's labeled as a living document. I believe that that is inside the Constitution, and therefore, what my kids or my grandkids might read into the words that I voted in could be a little bit different than what my intentions were, and I'm proud of that. I'm proud that there's a document that exists that there was consensus on, that is specific enough on the issues that, on the broad, strategy and, let's say, framework of what is intended, but yet is open enough to include language that can and probably should be interpreted differently generations from now. I'm very proud of that.
For sure. I really like that. That's a really unique perspective to take. I really like that. I haven't thought of that before. A living document. How has your experience as a delegate influenced your perspective on global collaboration and governance?
Well, I mean, we had a cross section of like just really, really clever, blockchain focused people. So I'm not going to say that there was any. I don't think there was any like huge cultural barrier or something that that I was aware of and unable to like overcome, or unaware of and became aware of. Um, I would say that this may not be the best example of the world coming together. It's very narrow focus, with a very narrow group of people that were elected by their peers, of which all of which are kind of a subset of like blockchain world already. I would say that it's a very good news and an amazing thing that globally speaking, blockchain has the ability to create that subset, and then that, so therefore a cross section of that can lead to consensus, a consensus on a variety of issues, including a constitution. That's very, very good news for the world, that blockchain, in its short history of less than a generation, has already created a group of people that understand what it takes to work together. I think that's probably a bigger deal. So.
Absolutely. That's really beautiful. One final question. As we look to the future, what advice would you give to communities that are considering similar governance initiatives?
So lessons learned, right? First of all, it's achievable, right? So like this can be done. Hey, so like don't let hey, Mr. Ethereum and Mr. Solana and all you guys out there, um, like this can be done, right? So this is very achievable. A B, I would like to have seen a bit more definition around the parliamentary procedure, right? So like what exactly is the process that we're going to use in communication? So with each other. So the discussion. So like once the floor was open or closed, it was unclear, where we were at. It's some of that, and so and I think Lloyd might even agree with some of that. But again, this was not something that hey, send it back. to the ground zero and let's start again. It was just I would like to have seen a little bit more rules, about it, and so maybe even like take a half a day before we all got together and just talk about, hey, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to work. This is what we're going to do. This is what a temperature check is. Here's how we're going to use it. Don't hijack it. We have to vote floor on, floor off, for in session, out of session. And I think it was a time issue, right? So like, a week wouldn't be enough to kind of manage that. But yeah, I think I would have liked a little bit more of the rules of engagement, because I think that would have changed a little bit of how like we approached to make the investment, right? And so at the end of the day, Hoskinson, in his glory, like, as it's understood by the delegates, unclear, in terms of like, I think he's been transparent about it. I'm not sure. I joined Twitter as a result of being elected on the Constitution Committee, so I'm not super active in that space. But I believe that Charles spent a lot of money to make this happen. And as a leader and as a creator in the space, like that's like that could be his role, right? So like that's not necessarily his role, but like if you're going to do it, that should be your role. And so to all the other founders and leaders of blockchain communities, and especially like tier one public blockchain creators, that's on you now. Like this now, like the bar has been set. If you want to advance your blockchain to the next generation and to the next group and to the next like iteration of what it is, there has to be some succession plan in place. Um, and and if you have a lot of assets as a result of like your actions inside blockchain, you should consider investing those back in a way that allows the community to like take ownership, of what you created and what you helped create. And yeah, that's a big takeaway. That's a big takeaway, right? And so, hey, I helped create it. Here's where we're at. Um, I know it's going to cost some money to do it right. I'm going to spend that money, and and then Bob's your uncle, and that's a big thing to say, because like once you relinquish and release control, like you don't know where that's going to end up, right? And so we were certainly steered in a couple of different directions and whatnot, but I think we as delegates realized only as we were kind of doing this, oh crap, it's on us now. Now we got to take this seriously. Me being elected to the Constitutional Committee is potentially a game-changing issue for me, right? So I've had to like clear other things off of my plate and be like, you know what, I'm going to take this seriously. I'm going to take this very seriously, because it's a multi-billion-dollar, blockchain that is the first ever, to engage in the way that it's engaging. And there are kind of keys given to the treasury in ways that hey, how are we going to do this? What are we going to do? How are we going to fund it? How are we going to move it? How are we going to invest in it? How are we going to work together? And we're all kind of figuring that out right now, like as we speak, literally. Um so yeah, so there's a lot of unknowns there. I don't mean to digress, but there's the decision to make that initial investment, if that's tied back to a person or to a group or to a company, you should absolutely look at the example that's set inside Cardano, and make some decisions around that. And I think that's a huge takeaway, of the entire event. Yeah.
Absolutely. Those are really great. Those are very helpful. Andrew, thank you so much for your time today and for your expertise. This has been really insightful for me, and I'm sure it will be for the rest of the community. Thank you.
Merry Orthodox Christmas from Tbilisi, Georgia. And yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing this and engaging with everyone online as we go forward.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. For GM Cardano, I'm Paige Medell.